clip. So Ben Shapiro and Russel Brand did a show the other day, and Ben Shapiro gave his understanding of Judaism versus Christianity, and it was such a Protestant understanding of Christianity, and I thought it was an interesting clip to play, and I thought maybe it would be good for us to just go over it and just explain how off
now,
Ben is.
Did you debrief Eric on the code words we use?
So when we're speaking of Ben Shapiro's ethnic background, we call them Amish just to avoid.
Okay.
To avoid.
You guys saw what happened to my video on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it just got crushed by the YouTube
tanked.
algorithms. I mean, just tanked. I mean, I had less than 5% of my normal live audience when I had a title with the wrong code word, and the algorithm just was like, we're just, and I kind of thought it might happen a little bit, but I had no idea it was going to be that effective. I was like, wow. So I'm with you, the Amish,
Yeah, we just say Amish because there's no anti-Amish defamation league.
That's right.
Well, that no Amish are watching.
They don't have electricity, so I figured. All right, Rob, let's run that Shapiro clip real quick. Let's see where we're at.
Yeah.
Judaism, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, in my understanding of Judaism, obviously, because who else's would apply? But it's I think Christianity comes at it from the other way, and there's a reward in it and there's a risk in it. The reward in it, Christianity says you believe the thing, therefore you do the thing. Judaism says you do the thing, therefore you believe the thing.
Wow.
Right. So Judaism,
you take the prescription and you will experience God.
Right.
Christianity, experience God, experience Christ.
And because you're doing
now,
that, then you'll do the good thing.
You do the right thing.
Right. And so the problem, cool. the reward of that is that the access point in some ways for Christianity is a lot easier, right? You experience a transcendent moment.
Yeah.
And now the transcendent moment is supposed to animate your life. The danger is transcendent moments disappear real fast, right? You have a transcendent moment and right now you're feeling God. And then 5 minutes from now, you're not feeling God, right? I mean, if that's the message of the book of Exodus, where they receive the Torah, the 10 commandments on Mount Sinai, and 5 minutes later, they're building a golden calf, right? The transcendent moment ends, you're building a golden calf.
You idiots.
Right.
Well, you're not listening.
Exactly.
Well, no, it's this now. It's this. I think we're going to go with the golden cow.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Talmud just explained to you.
Exactly. So but I think that, the best advice, and I think that gap has been sort of closed in the sense that Christianity then re-ritualized a lot of things, right? Christians still go to church, even if they're not feeling it that day, or they still are enjoying to give charity, even if they're not feeling it that day.
All discipline is this.
All discipline is this. But so I think that, when it comes to raising kids, to get back to the question you asked earlier, it's not enough to provide kids with kind of general principles. You have to give them a thing to do and a purpose and a role to play every single day. I'm very big into the idea that human beings have roles. I don't think that the idea of human beings without roles really exists. I think that a human being living on a desert island by himself is not free. I think he's the greatest prisoner of all. Ask anybody who's been put in solitary confinement how free they are, right? Even if there were no boundaries, even if there were no walls, even if there were no doors, right? You're living on a desert island. You're not free. You have to have a role and a thing to do in life. You have to have a purpose and you have to have a meaning, and that comes with rules, right? That's the uncomfortable part. The purpose comes with a set of rules that, generally speaking, allow you to best achieve that purpose, but on average. I mean, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule, right? There are always going to be a group of people for whom the rules are really, really tough, and it's asking a lot of them, and that's a real challenge. And we as a society have to say, okay, well, the rules still apply, but we understand that you're having a really tough time with the rules. I think one of the things that we've done as a society, however, is we've taken the people to whom the rules are the toughest to apply, and we've said, well, because it's very hard for this person to apply this rule in their life, the rule should just be obliterated because the rule is very uncomfortable for people.
And I think, if I may interject at this point,
let's turn it off, Rob. Let's just the values. So it's like he's actually right. So, like, I remember before I understood Catholicism, my original conversion was through like a Protestant preacher on my way home from Atlantic City. And I remember feeling like I was saved, but I didn't have my Catholic foundation to understand the sacraments and what we're doing. And I remember like questioning, I remember saying the Jesus prayer, like, Lord, I give myself to you and accept you as my personal Lord and Savior several times until I had confession back in my life. And
cringe, Anthony.
I know I was that guy, right? So, but the fact is, that's how you understand that Catholicism is a fulfillment of Judaism, because as Paul is going around and setting up these Christian communities, when he says, hold fast to the traditions, whether by word or mouth or by epistle, part of those the traditions that Paul's going around and giving is liturgy. And he's forming liturgy in these communities so that they have a ritual to follow. And it's the same reason I was saying the other day about why did they make us wear masks? Because the thing you do, it's lex orandi, lex credendi. The thing you do will make you believe. So that's the point of, that's why you never leave the sacraments. I don't care if you're, you could see in people like Steve Skojak, he during the COVID pandemic, he left the sacraments, and it was a drastic difference in before the pandemic and after the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, Shapiro, this is the thing we always have to remember when you get in your little subculture, which we are as our Catholic and particularly traditional Catholics, is it's very hard to see how other people see the world and their experiences, because Ben Shapiro is an American Amish person. He is.
I love that you're doing it with us.
and so his experience of Christianity is predominantly Protestant. And that's not his fault, because that's what, he lives in America, and that's what he's not going to go around and survey all the different, types of Christianity. And his experience of Catholicism is probably mostly like Bishop Barron, who I have written about often, his own interactions with Shapiro. But the point is like, he's actually very right in a lot of ways. First of all, his last point was a good one about like, it is true. We should have rules that we have everybody strive for, and we do not drop those for any reason whatsoever. But then what we do is when somebody doesn't meet those, we reach down and pick them up. That's what always drives me crazy about, let's just say, certain Catholic prelates who talk about just being an ideal, and so let's just reduce them down. No, we keep the rules exactly where they are. And we say, that's where, be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect. We strive for that. But then when we fall, that's why we have confession and things like that. But ultimately, is a very Protestant thing, because it is that whole, the dichotomy that Protestants make between works and faith, which they, in their misinterpretation of St. Paul. And of course, the idea is that we're saved by, grace working through faith. And so they're all involved. So like everything that Shapiro says, I'm just like, yes. He's saying them as contradictory. I'm like, no, actually, yes to both, because it is true. First of all, grace always is first. God's grace always, God is always the initiator in every situation. And so nobody is saved by their own power. Yet, at the same time, our response to that grace, our works do gain us merit. And they do then increase our faith. They do increase our belief. And so you really do have this whole relationship between the two where they interact with each other, initiated by God, but then it is this interaction between God and man that you're really working together for your salvation. And of course, the whole thing about the kind of transcendental emotional experience. I mean, I grew up Protestant. Obviously, I had the conversion to Jesus in my sophomore year of high school, where I gave my life to, made Jesus my personal. I did the altar call at a youth retreat. And yes, Our Friends Forever was playing by Michael W. Smith. It was very, but the thing is like, the funny thing is I laugh at it. It was very emotional, but yet it was a moment of grace. It really did. God really did work through it. And I know when I look at my own life, I know that was a time where my life changed paths. And so I'm very thankful for it. But I know now it is what it is. And you can't live with that. I also was involved with charismatic Catholic communities that they're always trying to get more and more, experience. It's always about the experience. And she's like, that's not, because Ben Shapiro is absolutely right that if that's what it's based upon, you're going to build that golden calf in a week, after that emotional experience. So yeah, it is unfortunate. I don't know much about Russel Brand, to be honest. I know who he is, and I've heard a few things, very good things from him in recent years. I don't know like his knowledge of it. You could tell he didn't really know, but that would be where it'd be great. Like Michael Knowles, if he could talk to him and say, okay, Ben, here's, where you're right, but also here's where you're kind of missing the boat. The fullness of Christianity isn't exactly what you think it is.
Yeah, well, I've also watched Ben talk to William Lane Craig, who's a brilliant apologist.
I just read a book by him. Yeah,
well, he's a brilliant Christian, general Christian apologist, and he hammered. There's a 12-minute clip where William Lane Craig kind of hammers Ben Shapiro on the question of Jesus way better than Bishop Barron does, like way better. But the thing that I feel like everybody misses when they're talking to Ben is, well, what do you, because Ben's like, well, you know, Jesus was a revolutionary and this is, you know, but it's like, what do you make of the prophecies? Like Jeremiah 31, see, the days are coming, oracle of the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It will not be a covenant I made with your ancestors the day I took them by the hand and led them out of Egypt. They broke my covenant, though I was their master, but this covenant I will make with the house of Israel in those days. I will place my law within them. I will write it upon their hearts. So like there's all these prophecies about God will make a new covenant, and he will be the God of the Gentiles. And, you know, the Gentiles have seen a great light. Then you have Jesus makes these prophecies and he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, and it starts off tiny, but then it's the biggest tree in the garden. And Jesus says, when I am lifted up, I will draw all men to me. It's like, what do you say about those prophecies that God promises his kingdom will cover the earth, and Christianity is the only thing that fulfills those promises and those prophecies? Like, why does nobody press anybody on those prophecies? Those prophecies are amazing when you really think about them.
And I think one of the biggest problems in talking to somebody like Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro, I don't follow these people in the sense that, like, every time I'll say something like positive about something like that, people are like, oh, he's terrible at this. I'm like, I don't know, and I don't care.
No,
he's
our only interaction is when we see him with Barron or something.
Yeah, and he's very good on certain things. Like my son really likes him and got his book and really liked it. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he seems like he's very good on a number of things. I mean, he's not like AOC or something like that. So, but I'm sure he's wrong on a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of Amish are. But here's the thing, though. The problem is that when Christians talk to someone like Ben Shapiro, they need to make him, the conversation needs to be uncomfortable. And that's what people are not willing to do. I'm not saying you're a jerk to him, because you shouldn't be. But the fact is like, in the classic example is when, and I'm not trying to boot on Barron, here, but when he dropped the ball so poorly, when Shapiro asked him, should I become Catholic? And he basically didn't say yes. It's like, he should have made him feel uncomfortable.
And Ben,
like, basically, like, Ben, being Amish is not going to save you. Yeah. I mean, that's what needs to be said.
Thick skin. He was
right. That's the thing, is I think he would respect that. I think Ben Shapiro would respect that. I don't think he would be. I mean, he might be a little uncomfortable. The conversation might get a little uncomfortable, but I think he'd respect it. I mean, I remember when I was living in Maryland, working a job, I had a guy I worked with a lot who was Jewish. Sorry, didn't say Amish.
No, that's fine.
He was a great guy, practicing. I think he was pretty conservative, like Ben Shapiro. He and I would have great conversations where they were very direct, and he never once took offense, because he was just a good guy, and he knew I was like not being a jerk and stuff like that. But he knew very clearly I thought, hey, you should become Catholic, and he thought I should become Jewish. And like, that's the thing, is like, this whole tiptoeing around it is just kind of silly. Because ultimately it's like, no, just say because like, do you really believe what you believe? If you really believe what you believe, you should tell him that. Because I bet you he would say, I bet you Shapiro would say, hey, you should become, Jewish or something like that. Yeah. So I think the whole thing is that's the real problem, because then once you make it more uncomfortable, then you can talk about why you believe. You can get into those discussions of, yes, Jesus really does fulfill. I mean, he's on point with all these prophecies from the Old Testament. He's on point with that. And you can show how really he is historically what he says he is, all that stuff.
Yeah. I think so much of the way we talk to people now has been shaded by women in the church, and I could see it even when I go to my in-laws, and they're asking. Yeah, well, but even this whole idea of just like having women run every ministry in the church since the council, and having female altar boys and all that stuff. Like, I saw it when my in-laws were asking me direct questions about Christianity on Easter. Like, they were very inquisitive. They were asking me things about scripture. And whenever I would get into something a little controversial, my wife was like elbowing me, like, be careful, like warning him. And I just pulled her on the side and I said, do not police my speech when I'm speaking about God. Like, I'm not going to offend anybody. Don't worry about it. But they're asking me direct questions. I need to be able to speak about it.
I've heard multiple stories of you offending people.
Oh yeah. But I'm not drinking now. So when I'm not drinking, I tend to be way more guarded in my speech. When I'm drinking, I do tend to go overboard and say ridiculous things in front of my in-laws.
And also remember, when you offend somebody, how often is it because the person takes offense at something they shouldn't?
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
not until you even said anything. You're just saying what you believe. And I think if you show sincerity, you're really kind of like, this is what I really believe. You might say something that might be a little bit prickly or whatever. And people who you have a relationship with, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's just him. And you know, I mean, they probably know you're a bozo. They're related to you.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal. But I do think though that I wouldn't say women in church. I just say effeminacy. Because obviously we need a feminine aspect of the church, our Blessed Mother and the women. But you're right. The problem is we have effeminacy in that the men who are in charge are letting women dominate them. Women who are saying we got to do it this way. I mean, it's interesting. The most I've written a couple hundred, at least a few hundred articles. I mean, actually more than that, probably hundreds of articles online. None were more popular than an article I wrote for Crisis before I was in charge of it called "No Church for Young Men."
Yeah.
And I had no idea that thing was going to hit like it did. I mean, I don't remember that. After I took over Crisis, I actually went back and looked at the stats on that one because I just dying to know because I knew it had done big. And it's in the top 4 or 5 of all Crisis articles in its whole 15-year online history. I think it's the number 2 or something like that. But the reason I'm saying that is because wow, did that hit? Because people realize it's not. We try to point to these specific things, but it's really just the underlying culture of your typical Novus Ordo diocesan parish. It's very effeminate. I'm not saying feminine. 100%. I'm saying effeminate. You walk in there, the music is effeminate, the decor is effeminate. You got the preaching is effeminate. The priest is usually effeminate. Everything about it is screaming. If you are a young man with even average testosterone, we want you out of here. That's what the message is being sent the second you walk into your typical Catholic parish. And it predominates. I mean, I would argue it's at least 90% of American parishes are on some level like this, if not even more. And then that's why when a lot of people, when they show up at a TLM parish, it's not even necessarily the liturgy itself as much as just the whole ethos is so different. It's so much like, oh my gosh, this is like a different religion because it really does. It does feel that way. And that's why when I say it is a different religion in practice, people get upset, but that's what I mean by it. And so I think you're right though. And so it's just like to take it back, when somebody like Ben Shapiro asks, should I become Catholic? The effeminate answer is to start talking about Vatican II and how, conscience and all this stuff. But it's like, the answer is yes. Yeah, I do think you should become Catholic. Absolutely. Why do you think I am if I didn't think you should be Catholic?
A great example of that is Taylor when he spoke to the rapper Bryson, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Bryson asked him straight out, is there salvation outside the Catholic Church? Taylor was like, no.
Yeah.
He just
that's the answer. Yeah, that's the answer.
My in-laws are actually Lutheran. And the pastor, this was the conversation that my wife was elbowing me about. So the pastor asked my father-in-law if he would come and do a few things with him at my father-in-law's like, I don't really want to go and do anything with the guy. Like, do I really even need to go to church? So I really started getting into it with him and explaining to him how going to church is how you embody the faith and why I go to Latin Mass and I take the kids to Latin Mass. He was so intrigued that my in-laws are coming to their first Latin Mass on Sunday as Lutherans. Great. So my wife was getting upset when I started explaining to them that, look, I will bring you, but you can't receive communion. Right. And my wife was like, why are you doing? I'm like, Nicole, I can't bring your parents to Mass as Lutherans. And my father-in-law is actually Catholic and he got married in a Lutheran church because his wife was Lutheran and doesn't have the background. So I had to explain why, but now they were so intrigued by what we do at the Latin Mass that Sunday they're coming to Holy Innocents in Manhattan, the most beautiful liturgy you can imagine, a high Mass, and then we're going to go do something in the city on Sunday. So it's like it pays to actually say what you believe at times.
That's exactly right. That's what I found too, is when you actually speak up, there will be some people who get offended, but most people, good-natured, they're like, okay, open-minded, like, okay, yeah, I want to check this out. Now, are you kind of prepping them to just kind of experience it and not try to follow
I told them they're not
along?
going to understand a single thing, right. But what I said
you should do something really traditional and kick them out halfway through.
I tell them they can't stay for the mass of the
No,
faith.
no, you can't see this part.
No, I what I said to them was, I said, look, the thing is, when we go to a Latin mass, what we're witnessing is a liturgy that has been practiced since times of antiquity. Like we're talking about a liturgy that's been going on since the 3rd, 4th century. You're seeing this ancient ritual. You don't understand half of it, but it's very mysterious. The priest is up by the altar. You don't always hear him. I said, but it's a ritual that's been going on since the time when Christianity began. I said, and I explained to them in the 60s, they changed it over. And that's what, and they were just like so interested. And they were like, I want to see this. Like, this is, you guys are so like every week you go and they see how much of a part of our lives it is. And they see how I'm raising my children. And it doesn't turn them off. They're like, my father-in-law actually, when we went away during the Super Bowl, he pulled me aside and he was like, Anthony, I can't tell you how like impressed I am by the way you're raising your children. And it's just such a beautiful thing that you're doing. Like he really has seen the witness of how our family is. My teenagers are so like, they're just such good kids. And I think he's really like impressed by seeing how they are so well grounded.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously the witness that's going to be the most lasting, is they see it affects you. If you're just a hypocrite, if you're just not really living your faith at all, they're not going to be attracted to it at all. And that's really, and I feel like that's, most people in America are living very empty lives. And it's sad to say. And so some of them can just, and we can distract ourselves from it by our phones or alcohol, TV, whatever. But I think ultimately what has to happen is some people will see how empty it is. And when they see other people living so differently, and that's the thing is about with culture getting so crazy, we're becoming more and more crazy looking, but that's actually going to attract people because they know that the other side is completely lies and just heartache and destruction. Whereas our side is actually joy, it's peace, it's, it's family, it's all these things that are actually good.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying. Oh, sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to bring it back to how we started the whole episode, the more the culture devolves into paganism, the more we'll look like the Christians look like to the Romans.
Right.
It will only make us more attractive.
Literally the point I was going to make, that Eric made that point of how the faith spread because they become. Now the biggest thing I see is, because Eric, we have 3 minutes left with you because I said 8:45, but he did say an hour between me and him. So Tom Holland made the point, who the author we're going to interview, he made the point to Bishop Barron, and he said the biggest problem he sees is that the church ceded so much of what it used to do with hospitals and caring for the poor and caring for the sick to the state, that the state now runs the hospitals and the state now has welfare programs and the state does all that, so that people don't actually see the witness of what the church actually does, because so much of that has been given to the state because the state is so saturated in Christian culture themselves.
And the fact is, we have to more and more separate ourselves from these institutions. We saw that with COVID. I'm convinced the medical establishment, I just don't have any faith in it anymore. I'm not saying there aren't good doctors and nurses out there, but I am saying you have to prove it before I'm going to believe it now. You are guilty until proven innocent at this point, after seeing how terrible they were with the whole COVID stuff and just with everything. And so we have to build up communities that are separated some. I mean, like the Amish, the actual Amish.
The real Amish.
What do we call the real Amish? The Amish Amish. I mean, now I've got my code word.
We call them the people in Lancaster.
Yeah, there we go.
Anthony had other words for them, but we're not going to use those.
Yeah, I got some Amish stories actually, but I won't tell them here.
I suppose in Ohio, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of them in Ohio.
I just know Lancaster smells so bad that
I'm telling you,
we won't get into it again.
But I do think, though, these type of things, though, I know everybody is supposed to not like Rod Dreher, and I do think he's an oddball, and he's got some weird things going on in his life. But the fact is that I do think his Benedict option, which is very misunderstood, is actually true and a good path. And I think the thing is, most of us who are probably on this channel right now, all like Anthony's mom and like 2 other people, they really do live out Sorry. I'm actually not sorry, but
I think you said that same joke in the very first interview you did on Anthony's channel.
And I don't think he's had any more audience. So it's still true. So
I was gonna say that first time it was accurate, but
yeah, right. Yeah. Now a couple of his cousins have come on. I mean, I like these fake people in the comments. I'm reading it. Like, I know Margot's not actually in the comments. You're actually just pretending you're her and stuff like that.
Most of these people came for you, so.
But the point is like just homeschooling. That's a Benedict option. Going the traditional Latin mass. Thank you, Connor. Going the traditional Latin mass. That is a Benedict option. Doing these things that are separating yourself somewhat from the system, and like
Catholic land movement.
Catholic land movement, a perfect example. Like, I use Samaritan Ministries for my health care. And that's outside the insurances. And I love it. And we don't go to I've started going to a lot more alternative care and healthcare stuff like that, because I just don't, because I was going to somebody and she was just pushing the vaccine on me so hard. And I was just like, I'm sorry, but I can't trust you to know what the heck you're doing. And she was pushing on our kids. And our kids weren't even with her. She was a pediatrician. So the whole point is, though, I think doing that, though, that is going back again. I know Dreher's talking about St. Benedict, but it also goes back to what we're talking about early Christians. They were kind of living a Benedict option before Benedict in the early Christian empire, because they were building these communities that were separated in some sense while in the world still, but it was an attraction to everybody, to the pagans to come to them.
It's really like the Israel in the Old Testament, being set aside and to build themselves into a nation. And that's kind of what we have to do. We have to build ourselves into a nation within our nation, so that we can be that Puritan city on a hill,
right?
In a sense.
Yeah. All right. We're going to let Eric get out of here. Rob and I are going to stay on for another half hour. So, Eric, I always love when you come on with us, man. You're such a great conversation. And,
I appreciate it. I think I have to be on Enoch's show next, I heard. So,
get to know Eric Sammons is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Make sure you know what your favorite cereal is, what cartoons you used to like to watch on Saturdays.
Oh, okay. I have not seen any of those. Sorry, Enoch, but I have not watched it. So
watch the Taylor episode. The Taylor episode is phenomenal.
Okay. See, I'm just following Taylor's coattails. He gets on a show. I'm like, okay, now I gotta be on. I gotta be a wannabe Taylor. I just follow his footsteps.
We noticed it went from you copying Connor's guests to now Connor copying your guests. Yeah, and Rob picked up on that. Connor's starting to pick what he's seen who you interview, and then I'll tell you, we had Gavin Ashenden on recently, Eric, and great. Because he's been on so many shows, we didn't want to talk to him about his conversion story. And he had a little blurb on his about page about smuggling Bibles into Russia during the Cold War.
Yeah.
He told us it was like an action movie.
It was,
he gets stopped by the KGB. And they are like frisking him, and they find something on him, and he winds up like, it's this whole story where he makes it like the guy found his keys and he pretends he's gay and he kisses a KGB agent on the lips and goes, "You wonderful man!" And the other agents are laughing so hard at the guy and ribbing him that the guy just goes, "Just get out of here, just get out of here!" And they never found the contraband he had on him. That's because great. He acted gay and kissed the guy. He had us rolling. He's amazing, Gavin Ashenden. I hope we get him back on again, man.
I love him. I think he's great. I do hope to have him on again. So yeah, and just so everybody knows, I do know that Avoiding Babylon now has somewhat of an audience because Rob's on it. I mean, that's the reason. It was just Anthony. It was literally like his mom and his cousin.
It really was.
And then it's like Rob comes on. Okay, now there's people. You have a much better chat, by the way, during your than I ever do on my live. So I do actually think one day you're just going to pass me, and then hopefully you'll still let me on at that point.
I try to always pop in your chat because you do 2 p.m. That's usually around when I'm leaving home, and I always try to. I always try to make you laugh. And I think one time I got you to crack a smile by calling you an anarcho-capitalist in your comment section. Yeah, you didn't acknowledge it, but you were like this.
What I need somebody to kind of check the comments because I'm doing the whole thing solo. Yeah. I do read them a little bit, Margot, but I'm doing the whole thing solo. So it's very haphazard whether or not I see it because what I really do need is get somebody to help me to kind of pop them up on screen at times and stuff like that. But I'm too busy listening to myself and, my arrogance. So.
Well, you guys know where to find Eric. Eric on Crisis Magazine. He's the, I almost never even introduce you because everybody knows you way more than they know us, but go check out Eric's videos on Crisis. What's the YouTube channel called? Crisis Magazine or Crisis Point?
Crisis Point. I don't know. You just search Crisis. Something. I don't know. It's on
If
YouTube.
you search Crisis Magazine, you'll find.
I think
Eric.
it's Crisis Magazine is what it is.
Okay,
Crisis
Crisis
Magazine.
Magazine. That's what it is. Then I don't know.
But follow Eric and Crisis on all social media platforms. Eric, thank you so much for coming on, man. I'll probably reach out in a few months again and bug you again. I always do.
Okay, sounds good, guys. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, brother.
He sounds so enthused at that, Anthony. He's like, oh, sounds good.
Can't wait.
He pretends he's not. He pretends he's me, but Eric's